So it was an emailed question from Charlie saying, "What are your thoughts on First Kings 13?" So I don't know how long of a chapter this is. Let's take a look. Um, so this is 34 verses. All right, Charlie, I'll do my best. Um, let's I'm gonna go ahead and let's make it a little bit more simple. We're gonna use the NIV and let's just read this. By the word of the Lord, a man of God. Uh, so in the future, try to give me a couple of verses or at least a portion, unless it's a short chapter, because I don't know how quick I'm going to be able to. I'm just going to share a few thoughts. We're probably not. I'm not going to verse by verse exegete this today. Um, so by the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah to Bethel, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. By the word of the Lord, he cried out against the altar, "Altar, altar!" So, um, so by the word of the Lord, a man of God came from Judah, as Jeroboam was standing by the altar to make an offering. By the word of the Lord, he cried out against the altar, "Altar, altar! This is what the Lord says: A son named Josiah will be born to the house of David. On you he will sacrifice the priests of the high places who make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you." So of you. So he said it of the altar. He went there by the word of the Lord. He says this to the altar. He says, "Of you, the priest of the high places who make he will sacrifice and make offerings here, and human bones will be burned on you." So God's altar will upon God's altar will be the priests who make sacrifices on the high places, which are usually demonic offerings to false gods. He says, "That same day, the man of God gave a sign. This is the sign the Lord has declared. The altar will be split apart, and the ashes on it will be poured out." Okay, so the altar will be split apart, the ashes on it will be poured out. So that's almost like the altar itself gets defiled and broken as a result of this sacrifice that's put on it, which is not normal. God never endorses human sacrifice, at least not as an acceptable offering to Him. He certainly allows people to get the death penalty, but it's not an offering to Him that's pleasing on an altar. He says, when King Jeroboam, this is the king of, I believe Israel. Not sure. He was a king when the tribes were divided. I don't remember if it was the north or the south. He heard what the man of God cried out against the altar at Bethel. He stretched out his hand from the altar and said, "Cease." So King Jeroboam hears him say this and goes, "What? No way." Sees him, but the hand he stretched out towards the man shriveled up so that he could not pull it back. So God literally intervenes and says, "No, what he says is right. I sent him there." Right? He shows him a sign so he knows that it's okay what he said, even though it sounds wrong, right? Like, this sounds very bad. He goes, "Also, the altar was split apart and its ashes poured out according to the sign given by the man of God by the word of the Lord." Then the king said to the man of God, "Intercede with the Lord your God and pray for me that my hand may be restored." So, like, my hand's like this because I tried to stop you, and you're clearly here by God. So do what you got to do, and then pray for me. So the man of God interceded with the Lord, and the king's hand was restored and became as it was before. The king said to the man of God, it's kind of interesting. It's like a touch not the Lord's anointed, even though it has nothing to do with killing the guy. It was about seizing the guy, and God intervened and said, I sent him here to say this. The king said to the man of God, come home with me for a meal, and I will give you a gift. And he wants to get on his good side now. But the man of God answered the king, even if you were to give me half your possessions, I would not go with you, nor would I eat bread or drink water here. For I was commanded by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water or return by the way you came. So he took another road and did not return by the way he had come to Bethel. Now there was a certain old prophet living in Bethel, or Bethel, either way, whose sons came and told him all that the man of God had done there that day. They also told their father what he had said to the king. Their father asked them, which way did he go? And his son showed him which road the man of God from Judah had taken. So he said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. And when they had saddled the donkey for him, he mounted it and rode after the man of God. He found him sitting under an oak tree and asked, are you the man of God who came from Judah? I am, he replied. So the prophet said to him, come home with me and eat. The man of God said, I cannot turn back and go with you, nor can I eat bread or drink water with you in this place. I have been told by the word of the Lord, you must not eat bread or drink water there, or return by the way you came. The old prophet answered, I too am a prophet, as you are. And an angel said to me by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house so that he may eat bread and drink water. And yeah, I was about to say it, like there's a conflict here because God does not contradict himself like this. And then you see here in parentheses, but he was lying to him. Ooh, false prophet. So the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. Oh no. See, when you know you hear from God, it should take more than some other person saying, oh yeah, I hear from God too. I'm a prophet too. Don't disobey God because somebody else tells you it's okay and God told them it was okay. Especially when God just did a miracle to the actual king of either Israel or Judah, and to authenticate what he told you, then I would say, if you want me to disobey God, or you're here to tell me that God is saying you're not supposed to go with King Jeroboam, but you can go with me instead, then I want a sign of it, and I'm also going to pray and ask the Lord. So I want to see a miraculous sign that God authenticating you, and then also I want him to confirm it in my spirit. I'm going to ask him directly as well. And so that's what you want to do. And he didn't do that. So while they were sitting at the table, the word of the Lord came to the old prophet who had brought him back. So that's interesting. Maybe he was a prophet, or at least at this time, the word of the Lord did come to him. He cried out to the man of God who have come from Judah. This is what the Lord says. You have defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to eat or drink. Therefore, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. Yeah, so God, kind of like we were just looking at before with stewardship, God's holding you accountable for your disobedience, which is interesting that he told that through this other guy, who also was a false prophet and lied to the guy. Interesting. He says, when the man of God had finished eating and drinking, the prophet who had brought him back saddled his donkey for him. As he went on his way, a lion met him on the road and killed him, and his body was left lying on the road with both the donkey and the lion standing beside it. some people lying there with the lion standing beside the body, and some people who passed by saw the body lying there with the lion standing beside the body, and they went and reported it in the city where the old prophet lived. When the prophet who had brought him back from his journey heard of it, he said, "It is the man of God who defied the word of the Lord. The Lord has given him over to the lion, which has mauled him and killed him, as the word of the Lord had warned him." The prophet said to his sons, "Saddle the donkey for me," and they did so. Then he went out and found the body lying on the road, with the donkey and the lion standing beside it. The lion had neither eaten the body nor mauled the donkey. So it's so interesting. The lion's just still sitting there. It's very interesting. It was definitely led by the Lord to do this act, almost in the same way that Balaam's donkey was led to speak to Balaam. Verse 29 so the prophet picked up the body of the man of God, laid it on the donkey, and brought it back to his own city to mourn for him and bury him. Then he laid the body in his own tomb, and they mourned over him and said, "Alas, my brother." Excuse me. After burying him, he said to his sons, "When I die, bury me in the grave where the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his bones." So he wanted to honor him still as a prophet, for the message he declared by the word of the Lord against the altar in Bethel and against all the shrines on the high places in the towns of Samaria will certainly come true. Even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. Yep, don't even have any requirements. Just, if you want to do it, you can do it. So evil. Verse 34, this was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. So Charlie, you asked what my thoughts are. I think obey God. Obey God. Especially when you know you're a prophet, you know you heard from the Lord. He went there, you said it point blank to the actual king. But then you were misled and deceived by somebody in a false prophecy. I think that Jeroboam's reign was evil, right? And he continued to appoint more priests to do this. And so there is being buried in, I wish I could remember if this was, I wish if I can remember, let's see. All right. Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, so he's in the north, Judah's in the south. That was driving me nuts. I couldn't remember. All right, so being buried in Israel at that time underneath Jeroboam's reign was not really a privilege. And so really the better thing, let me find it. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to eat or drink. Therefore, your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. The better thing would to be buried in the tomb where you came from, right? Where this man came from, his ancestors. The less the lesser thing would be to be buried in Israel, underneath these strangers and, underneath Jeroboam's reign. And so I think it was just a punishment for his act of defiance. Um, all too often people want to be like, you know, God wouldn't, only Satan, steals, kills, and destroy, and God wouldn't kill anybody. Um, I think, let me find it really quick. Um, um, let's see. Yeah. We can even look right here. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 15, when God says this, see, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. Right? You choose if you will obey and be prosperous, or disobey and die. Right? We can also look at chapter 32, verse 39 says, God says, see now that I myself am he. There is no God beside me. I put to death and I bring to life. I have wounded and I will heal, and no one can deliver out of my hand. Right? All life comes from God, and ultimately death does too, because death is a consequence of sin. Now, it could be your sin, or it could just be the consequence of sin of living in a fallen, broken world, right? But God is ultimately in control still. And so I think we have a unbiblical theology when, like, anytime you get a good thing, it must be God, and anytime it's a bad thing, it must be Satan. No, sometimes your own sin, or the sin of the world, is the reason why bad things happen, and God is ultimately sovereign and in control. And so we need to have greater fear of God. And so, yep, I think this prophet's I think he just suffered the consequence of rebellion. I think it's as simple as that. Definitely a weird story, and gratefully we don't have a lot of these, like where God like just sends somebody to get killed by a lion. At least he didn't let the lion eat him. But it was a wicked. We also need to recognize it was a wicked time in Israel. Literally, think about this. You're the person. Imagine you're the person. He sends you to this land, and then you're like, I'm going here. I'm going to go directly to the altar at Bethel. The king himself is there, and I'm going to tell him on this altar will basically be the priests who've been sacrificed, that you keep appointing to sacrifice to these false gods on this altar. That's what's going to happen. Right? And so you're there on assignment, like you are the vehicle with which God is communicating prophecy of judgment against this king, against this nation, against this region. You're not there on vacation. And God's like, don't eat, don't drink, don't stay, don't get comfortable. You're not, you don't want anything from this place, right? And even from like a spiritual warfare perspective, we might even say like that which you might eat and drink is cursed, right? There's demonic influence all over this place. You will be defiled if you participate in it. Even the other prophet, who supposedly gets a word from God still later, He still comes and lies about it, right? This whole place is broken. And so I think another lesson we could learn from this is stay undefiled. In addition to just staying obedient to God, stay undefiled by the sinful, polluted, wicked things of this world. Right? If God sends you on mission, we talked about stewardship. Let's say God sends you on mission to go to a satanic temple and tell them, and maybe you do a miraculous sign the way that he did, right? They got leprous hand or whatever it was. And you're there to tell them this prophetic doom, to warn them. Don't hang out and eat. If God tells, you know what I mean? Like God says, don't eat, and then you do it anyway, and then you're hanging out in the satanic temple eating with them, or just hanging out in their community. I don't know. So that's a few thoughts. Probably a lot more than you thought I was going to give, and more than I thought I was going to give.